Hello, you are listening to Dr. Sushma Singh. Today in Unit 29, Social Movements, Meanings and Dimensions, let us start our topic, Transformation of Social Movements. Every social movement is having a life history and undergoes a process of transformation. The movement may emerge to be routinized, accompanying a decline in support for the movement. Such a process of transformation of the movement is indeed contextual and cultural, cultures, policy and economic specific. Galt studies transformation to social movement within the comparative framework. He finds that the process of transformation of social movement in the United States and Western Europe has been oriented to be reformist, while in the Eastern Europe social movement transformed itself into regime challenges. It is observed in the developed societies that in the absence of a shared culture of popular opposition to the authorities and powerful groups, in the absence of a grassroots organization structure, lack of space for unconventional tactics, and likely co-opt of dissents and critics by the state, collective mobilization are not sustained for a larger time. Here, most of the social movements are institutionalized in nature. The emergence of a national social movement from within the institutionalized frame of reference of the state is, as pointed out by Tilly, a social movement is neither a party nor a union but a political campaign. What we call a social movement actually consists in a series of demands or challenges to power holders in the name of a social category that lacks an established political position. As pointed out earlier, ideology, organization, leadership, subjectivity, idealism, and orientation towards the change are important components of social movements and closely attached to the process of collective mobilization and new identity formation. Change in the form of these components brings tremendous change in the character of the social movement, and accordingly social movements may also be categorized. P.N. Mukherjee categorizes social movement as a revolutionary movement and quasi-movement based on the nature and direction of change initiated by the process of collective mobilization. To him, when collective mobilization aims at effecting wide-ranging and far-reaching changes of a system, it may be called a revolutionary movement, and when it aims for changing within a system only, it may be called a quasi-movement. Socialists observing the life histories of the various social movements point out that sooner or later a social movement becomes subject to the process of routinization. Often a protest movement starts off with a radical ideology but develops its own establishment in turn. To Rao, when a movement with a defined ideology becomes a well-established political party, it ceases to be a movement. Singh Roy highlights that in the Indian context, any attempt to analyze a social movement ought to reflect upon the dynamics of the movements over a period of time, since the transformation of these movements are not discrete. Rather, the ideological reorientation and organizations of those movements continue to remain attached with the collective mobilization in one form or the other. Thus, over a period of time, there is a process of institutionalization of mobilization. T.K. Oman points out that the processes of the mobilization and institutionalization do coexist, and that institutionalization provides a new possibility of mobilization. According to him, the processes of the institutionalization and mobilization are to be viewed essentially to be the two different phases of a movement rather than mutually inimical processes. In the final analysis, mobilization is not displaced by institutionalization but goes hand in hand to a large extent, and often the latter process actuates the former. The process of institutionalization, according to the Oman, refers to a socially prescribed system of differentiated behavior based on a relatively stable interaction pattern hinged on socially accepted values, norms, roles, and practices. While studying the process of institutionalization of collective mobilization, he emphasized the role of institutional entrepreneurs towards the process of institutionalization. He, however, visualizes a contradiction in the institutional role of such entrepreneurs, as all may not accept their initiatives. Thus, to him, institutionalization of mobilization may not lead to the bureaucratization, formalization, or a status quo. It may rather bring with it possibilities of change, because the value dissensus it creates may eventually lead to confrontation between the contending collectivities with which provide the potential for continuous change. In his study of the agrarian labor movement in Kerala, highlights that the emergence of movement organization leading to routinization of Christmas, development of bureaucratic structure, emergence of a parallel elite, persistence of mobilization beyond the purpose for which it emerged, invariably leads to the institutionalization of social movement. He argues that there is no inherent tendency towards an institutionalization of a social movement. Even when it occurs, it does not necessarily stop or even decelerate the process of mobilization, which is so fundamental and prime to the very survival of a movement. To him, mobilization implies a collective action affecting the quality of politics. It calls for the induction of new structure into the system to meet the new challenges. That is, mobilization necessitates the creation of new institutions and their institutionalization. He also finds that mobilization is a continuous process with a varying scale and intensity over a period of time. While examining the issues of transformation of social movement in India, the observation made by Bipin Chandra in the context of the Indian national movement is worth mentioning. He highlights that this movement derived its entire force from the militancy and spirit of self-sacrifice of the masses. Including a large section of the peasantry and small landlords, this movement followed the strategy of truce struggle truce, in which phases of extra-legal mass movement alternate with more passive phases carried on within the confines of legal space. To Chandra, this strategy of Gandhi had the capacity to utilize the constitutional space without getting co-opted, and to maintain contacts with the masses and absorb their creative energies. This strategy, according to Chandra, bears close resemblance to the strategy of war of position as put forward by Gramsci. Gramsci saw India's political struggle against English as containing three forms of war: war of movement, war of position, and underground warfare. Gandhi's passive resistance was a war of position, which in certain movement becomes war of movement. and in others underground warfare. Boycott are a form of war opposition. Strikes are war of movement. The secret preparedness of weapons and combat troops belong to underground warfare. The Indian National Congress accepted the strategy of war opposition, which had two basic thrusts. It was hegemonic and it alternated between phases of extra-legal mass struggle and phases of truce functioning within the law. This entire political process of truce was an upwardly spiraling one, which also assumes that the freedom struggle would pass through several stages, ending with the transfer of power by the colonial regime. Here we want to close the lecture. Thanks for listening.